I was folding the shawl I planned to wear when the envelope came. No return address, just my name in my son's handwriting. I knew that curl on the lowercase y. He used to doodle it on his notebooks in high school. He used to save them. I didn't. Sit down right away. I stood at the kitchen counter, one hand still holding the edge of the fabric, the other tracing the seal of the envelope like it might change its mind. My hands were clean but smelled faintly of lemon oil. I'd been polishing the silver tray I wanted to gift them. The paper was thick. He didn't write it by hand. It was typed with my name at the top like a business memo. He hoped I wouldn't take it personally. He said the guest list had gotten complicated, that it might be easier if I stayed home. His words were polished, careful. A lawyer's draft. Probably not his fiance's style. She was more direct. It was him. Always so afraid of confrontation, he ended up choosing silence over sincerity. Like his father, there was no mention of love. No, I'll miss you. Just logistics. A wedding photo would be mailed. He'd appreciate it if I didn't make a fuss. I didn't cry, not right away. Instead, I folded the shawl again, put it back in its plastic wrap, set it on top of the suitcase I'd already packed. 3 dresses. The pale blue one, because he once told me it made me look soft and kind. It felt foolish suddenly to have even considered wearing it. I stared at the suitcase for a long time. Like maybe it would give me a different answer. That night, I boiled an egg and didn't eat it. I sat with the television on mute and listened. To the house breathing, I listened to the old pipes hum. I listened to the fridge hum back. I didn't sleep. I don't know what time it was when I opened the drawer in the hallway. The one where I kept the birthday cards he made me when he was little. The macaroni necklace he gave me when he was 5. A rock with a glitter heart glued. To it, I held that rock for what felt like hours. I think I was waiting for it to warm in my hand. Indeed, by morning, I had written the letter. Not out of anger, just clarity. Like waking up underwater and realizing I'd been holding my breath for years. I wrote it on linen paper, the kind I used to keep for special things. I only wrote 2 paragraphs. I didn't sign it with love. It's just my name. I mailed it the same day his came. Put mine into the drop box at the gas station on Route 8. Drove back without the radio. The silence felt safer. That weekend, I didn't turn on my phone. I cleaned the oven. I dusted behind the refrigerator. I washed every window in the house until I could see the sky like glass. His wedding day came and went like a faint headache, a dull pressure behind the eyes. I kept imagining the moment they'd call my name for the family photos, realize I wasn't there. Maybe someone would notice the empty seat. Maybe someone would ask where she is, but I don't think anyone did. When the wedding photo arrived 3 weeks later, it came with a short note. Hope you're well. Here's a photo from the day. Take care. I didn't open the envelope. I didn't need to. I already knew what wasn't in it. I wasn't always someone they could forget. There was a time when my son, Evan, would run to me like the world was too big without my arms. He was 5 the first time he asked me what a wedding was. We're sitting in the back seat of the car parked outside his aunt's church. He had on his little navy blazer and clip-on tie. He asked why Aunt Carla looked like a princess and why everyone cried when she walked down the aisle. I told him people cry when they feel too much joy. He said, "Will you cry when I get married?" I remember laughing, brushing his bangs back from his forehead and saying, "Only a little." He said, "I'll tell them to save you a seat in the front." That night, I wrote it down in my journal. One line. He said he'd save me a seat. That was 26 years ago. I used to reread that entry when he was at college just to feel close to him. Now, I think of it like an artifact. It's proof that there was once love. That he wasn't always. Like this. Evan was a sweet child, earnest. He liked order. Rules. I used to think it was just him being precocious. But now I wonder if he was already learning to manage emotions by minimizing them. He liked when things were calm, quiet, predictable. His father was none of those things. Tim had a temper that came out of nowhere. It wasn't shouting or hitting, not usually. It was silence. It's the kind that made every room colder. He'd come, Home and say nothing. Eat dinner in 3 bites and vanish behind a closed door. Evan would follow him sometimes, trying to read to him from his books. Tim would pretend to listen, nod once or twice, then turn on the TV mid-sentence. I remember Evan looking up at me once after that and asking, "Did I do something wrong?" I told him no. I told him he was good, smart, loved, but I think that planted something, a pattern. He learned early that love required adjusting yourself, making yourself easier to be around. He got good at anticipating other people's discomfort, even if it meant ignoring his own, especially if it meant ignoring mine. I tried to be the buffer. I picked up the slack. I filled the silence with warmth. I went to every school recital, every parent-teacher meeting, every nurse's visit. When Tim forgot Evan's birthday one year, I took the day off work and created a treasure hunt around the house so it would still feel magical. Evan laughed until he fell asleep in my lap. I remember thinking I could carry both our weights if I just kept moving. By the time Evan was a teenager, Tim was already gone more than he was home. He took a job across the state and said it was better that way. I stopped correcting people when they called me a single mother because I was really Evan and I had a rhythm. We made popcorn on Fridays. We watched nature documentaries. He hated blood, so he'd bury his face in a pillow during the Predator scenes. When he got into college, I took the acceptance letter to the office and taped it to my cubicle wall. Even now, I can still picture the stamp in the corner. The paper had a slight tear where I'd opened it too quickly. I cried in the bathroom that afternoon. Happy tears. I gave him everything I could. I took out a loan to cover what scholarships didn't. I ate canned soup for lunch and skipped vacations for 4 years so he wouldn't have to feel the weight of it. He sent postcards at first, then emails, then less. I told myself it was normal. Kids grow up. They make their own lives. But it wasn't the growing that hurt. It was the subtraction. Okay? Like every step forward he took meant one more step away from me. Still, I stayed generous. When he met Hannah, I hosted them for dinner 3 times. I made chicken with rosemary. I put out the cloth napkins. Hannah said the place felt like a time capsule. I told her I liked having things last. They got engaged in spring. He called to tell me and used that tone I didn't recognize. All business, no softness. He said they wanted something simple, not too emotional. He said weddings could be triggering. 4 people. I didn't ask who he meant. I said I'd be honored to help. He paused, said, "That's nice of you. We're trying to keep it small." I offered the necklace my mother wore at her own wedding. Pearls delicate and warm with age. He said they'd think about it. The next time I heard from him was the envelope. So no, it didn't happen overnight. It was a slow erasing. One memory at a time, one skipped call, one diluted visit. Like I was being gently moved to the margins. So no one had to admit they'd pushed me. I don't know why people say blood is thicker than water. I've seen water carry boats, sustain gardens, cool fevered skin, blood stains and dries. When he was small, he used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms and tuck himself under my arm. I'd feel his heart thudding through his pajamas. I'd tell him he was safe. I wonder who told him he needed protection from me. It wasn't a sudden betrayal. It was a careful one, planned, smoothed over. I found the proof a month before the letter came. At the time, I didn't know what I was looking at. It was an accident, like most truths are. I'd gone to the bank to get a copy of the old safe deposit lease. I still had my grandmother's wedding ring in there, and I wanted to see about gifting it to Evan. I thought it might be something meaningful, something that would last longer than a check or a toaster oven. The woman at the front desk was new, young, polite, with the kind of tight smile that tells you she's trying. She pulled up my account and paused, tilted her head, said, "There's a joint authorization note here. I just need to verify something." I didn't understand. Never shared that box. It was always mine. My name alone. She said, "Oh wait, never mind. Sorry. Must have been a temporary request. Looks like it was added and removed in the same week." It's probably a clerical thing. I asked for the dates. It had been 6 weeks earlier. 2 days after Evan visited, the one time that spring. He'd brought Hannah. They stayed for tea. I remember he kept checking his phone. I remember I couldn't quite get him to meet my eyes. I didn't say anything to the woman behind the counter. I thanked her, took the copy of the lease, and walked back to my car. I sat with the engine off, hands on the wheel, not driving, just listening to the slow-ticking sound of the cooling metal under the hood. He had tried to access the box, or someone had on his behalf. And then they undid it, quietly. But the attempt was there. The fingerprint of it. That was when something shifted. Not shattered, exactly, just tilted. I'd told myself for years that his silences were benign, that he was busy, that his world had grown so big it just couldn't always loop back to me. But this wasn't forgetfulness. This was decision. The next day, I checked the deed to the house still in my name. Good. Then I went through the file cabinet and pulled every legal document I had. Birth certificates, insurance papers, my will, my medical directive. I made copies, started keeping the originals in a locked drawer. It was like some ancient reflex had kicked in. The instinct of a woman who's been told one too many times that she's overreacting. So I didn't react. I prepared. I didn't ask him why. I didn't accuse. What would be the point? It'd say it was a mistake. Say he didn't know about. It'd say he'd never do something like that. Maybe he wouldn't have. Not yet. But the attempt had been made, even if he retracted it. The impulse lived in someone's mind. When you've spent your life carrying a child, it's hard to believe they'd lift a hand to take from you. Even quietly. Even with a paper trail instead of a weapon. But it happens. I thought about the money I'd loaned him after grad school. I thought about the house repairs I paid for when their roof started leaking. The engagement dinner I hosted. The time he asked to borrow against an inheritance I hadn't even passed. And yet I'd told myself that was love, that mother's help, that he would never let me be taken for granted. But love shouldn't need this many justifications. I remembered something his father once said during one of the colder months. We'd been arguing in the garage, standing between the old boxes of winter clothes and the broken snowblower. He'd said, "You make everything a test." Like I had set a trap just by expecting to be considered. Now, decades later, I wondered if Evan had inherited that same defensiveness, that same dread of being held accountable. Maybe he looked at me and saw expectation instead of support. If maybe he thought stepping back was the same as setting boundaries. But there's a difference between space and exile. The week before the wedding invitation, or uninvitation, I should say, I got a voicemail from Hannah. Her voice was clipped, efficient. She said they hoped I'd understand if they kept things small, that family dynamics were complicated, that they were trying to avoid stress. She didn't say my name, just you. I deleted it. I didn't respond. Then the letter came. Then the photo. I never opened it. It still sits in the drawer by the front door, sealed. I imagine it sometimes. The two of them standing beneath some garland of eucalyptus and fairy lights. Her with her hair pulled back, minimal makeup. Him in a tailored suit, probably gray. Smile like a stranger. Maybe they'll have children, okay? Maybe one day a little boy will ask why his grandmother isn't in any of the wedding pictures. Maybe he'll never ask. I've stopped trying to imagine being part of their stories. What I think about more often now is the thinness of paper. How easily it folds, tears, burns. I think about how signatures don't guarantee anything except that once someone agreed. And I think about how the deepest betrayals don't come with shouting. They come with documents, silence, smiles that don't reach the eyes. After the envelope and the voicemail and the silence that followed, I stopped making tea for two. It sounds small, but it wasn't. For 27 years, I'd set out two mugs in the morning, out of habit, out of memory. First for Tim and me. Then, after he left, I kept the second one anyway, like a placeholder for whatever version of family might still show up. Evan used to drink his with too much sugar. 3 heaping spoonfuls stirred in a hurry. He'd leave the spoon clinking against the ceramic spinning circles long after he'd taken his first sip. When he moved out, I still left the spoon in its usual place, just in case. Now I only use one. There's a kind of relief in the quiet when you stop expecting someone to knock. At first it feels like morning. Then it just becomes room. I sat with that room for weeks. I didn't rush to fill it. I didn't run to friends or therapists or the internet. I didn't explain myself to anyone. People always want a story. They want a reason, a villain, a quote to put in the group chat. I gave them none. I started taking walks at dusk. Same streets I'd lived on for decades, but they looked different at that hour. More forgiving. The kids were in their houses. The cars parked and still. Porch lights clicked on without ceremony. I liked the way the air felt honest. It's just air. No performances. One evening, I passed by the corner lot where Mr. and Mrs. Hargrove used to live. They died within a year of each other. He was 92. She followed him, as people do when they've been known too long by someone to unknow them. Their granddaughter lives there now, Ellie. She keeps a garden that overflows in the spring. That night, she was out on the porch, barefoot, watering her mums. She waved, said it was good to see me out. I said the same. She asked if I wanted cuttings. Said not yet, but I remember how her face looked open, unguarded. It's the way you look at someone when you don't expect anything from them but still hope they're well. That night, I made a list in my notebook. Not a revenge list. Not even a goals list. Just a list of what I still had that no one could take. My name, the house deed, a good pair of hands, a quiet kind of courage, and time. It surprised me, that last one. I used to feel like I was always running out of it. But now, without their schedules, or permissions or needs pressing in on mine, time felt like something I could touch. Like warm bread dough, soft and slow to rise, but dependable. I started baking again for no one. I used to bake to impress, to give, to fill someone else's hunger. Now I made a single small loaf. I let it cool fully before slicing. I ate it with butter and didn't think about who might want the last piece. I bought a fireproof box. I labeled every document, copied my will and changed it. Took Evan's name out. Not out of malice. Just honesty. He'd made it clear I was no longer his family in practice. So I adjusted the paperwork to match. I named the local library as one of the beneficiaries. And the women's shelter where I used to volunteer. I left something for Ellie, too. Not because she'd asked for anything. Because she looked at me like I still had a name. One afternoon, I walked into the bank again. It's the same branch where the mistake had first come to light. The same girl was there. She asked how she could help. I said I'd like to remove all secondary access and freeze any pending authorizations tied to my name. She nodded. No questions. Just typed and clicked and printed. She asked if I wanted to set a password on the account. I said yes. She asked what word I wanted. I said, enough. When I got home, I closed the old photo albums. Not out of anger, but because I didn't want to keep revisiting scenes where I was still trying to earn love. Instead, I bought a blank journal. I wrote in it most mornings. Not poems or affirmations. Just facts. What time I woke up, what the sky looked like, what I cooked, how I felt when no one was watching. Some days the page stayed almost empty. Some days I filled too. It wasn't for anyone else. It was just to remind myself I existed, so that my days had shape. Even if no one documented them on social media or asked how I spent them. I didn't tell Evan I'd changed the will. I didn't announce anything. This wasn't a performance, it was a boundary. There's a kind of power in knowing. You don't need to be pitied to be free. I stopped hoping for apologies instead. I built a room inside myself where I could sit without being erased, and that's where I began to live. I didn't leave with a bang. I didn't even leave in the middle of the night. I left on a Tuesday after folding my laundry and locking the back door. There was nothing dramatic about it. It's just clean towels in the closet, empty trash cans, and the sound of my own shoes on the front steps. The bag I took was small. One suitcase, one folder, one purse. Left the good china. Left the boxes of cards Evan had drawn as a child. I didn't need them anymore. Love that has to be proven over and over again starts to feel like evidence. At a trial, I was tired of testifying. I left the house key under the mat, not because I wanted him to find it, but because I didn't need it anymore. I'd already signed the papers. A week earlier, I'd met with the attorney. A woman named Ruth, in her early 50s, with silver streaks in her hair and a voice that didn't rise or fall with emotion. I liked her immediately. She didn't ask why. She just asked how soon. We rewrote everything. Will, trust, healthcare. Proxy, we transferred the house title to a land trust under my name. I gave instructions for what to do if someone came looking later. She nodded and didn't offer platitudes. She said, "Good. Let's get you protected." It felt like therapy, but with folders and stamps, I withdrew half my savings and moved it to a local credit union in a different town. Not hidden, not illegal, just mine. I had spent most of my adult life combining everything. My money, my time, my love. I didn't want to share anymore. I found a motel 2 towns over. Nothing fancy. Just clean sheets, a working lock, and a window. That opened to the smell of pine. The man at the front desk didn't ask questions. He handed me the key and said, "Breakfasts from 7 to 9. "Ma'am," I told him I probably wouldn't need it. The first night I sat on the bed with the TV, on low static voices mumbling in the background while I unpacked. I laid out the folder first. Inside were copies of every document that bore my name and no one else. S. My birth certificate. My new will. My house title. A. Single-page letter with emergency contacts that did not include Evan. I placed it in the drawer next to the Bible. A strange kind of comfort my name next to that old leather-bound book. It's both untouched, but there if needed. The motel had thin walls. I could hear a couple arguing next door, then laughing, then silence. A baby cried down the hall. Someone wheeled in a suitcase over the gravel walkway. I watched their shadow move past my curtain. I wasn't afraid. I thought I might be, but I wasn't the next morning. I woke up at 6. I made myself coffee from the little machine on the dresser. It tasted like plastic and burnt beans, but I drank it anyway. I sat by the window and wrote in my journal. 6:42 a.m. Sky is overcast. Room smells like old soap. But I feel calm, like someone turned off a loud machine I didn't know had been running. I didn't go on social media. I didn't check the news. I didn't tell anyone where I was, not even the neighbors. I left a note taped to the inside of my kitchen cabinet. In case the house ever needed to be entered. It said, "I'm not missing. I've simply decided to be somewhere else." There's a kind of clarity that comes when you no longer expect anyone to come after you. I didn't want to disappear forever. I just wanted to stop living in the story they wrote for me. I wasn't the fragile mother. I wasn't the burden. Wasn't the embarrassment to be left off the guest list. I was a woman with her name on every line that mattered. I kept walking. Some days I drove to the next town, sat in the library, and read the ice. Like Effet read the newspaper from front to back. Not for headlines, just the shape of other people's lives. Gog rescued from a drain pipe. A couple married for 70 years. A hardware store closing after 40. Things ended. Things endured. Both could be true. I visited a diner where no one knew me. I ordered soup and said thank you and listened to the clatter of cutlery against ceramic. I left a tip that was more than needed. I liked knowing someone would be surprised in a good way. I started wearing my wedding ring again. Not because I missed Tim, because I liked the feel of gold against my skin. I liked the weight. I liked knowing it belonged to me by the 3rd week. I stopped thinking about what they were doing, Evan and Hannah, whether they noticed, whether they cared, whether they told people I was sick or traveling or estranged. That word estranged always sounds like a fault line, like someone's to blame. But sometimes the land just splits. Sometimes you look up and realize the people you love have already walked too far in the other direction. You've been waving at their backs for years. Eventually, you put your hand down, you start walking. 2. Only this time, you walk toward yourself. It started with a voicemail from Evan, 3 weeks after the wedding. "Hi, Mom. Just calling too. I guess to check in. I hope you've got the photo. I haven't heard from you. We were wondering if everything was okay." He didn't say he missed me. He didn't ask where I was. The voice was stiff, deliberate, like he was leaving a message for a distant colleague. I could hear Hannah in the background saying something. He didn't mute the phone. He added, "Call when you can." I DYT'd single quotes. 2 days later, another message. This time, it was Hannah. Her tone was sharper, clipped. "We're getting a bit concerned. Your phone's been off, and Evan said he tried the house, but no answer. If you're upset, we're sorry, but this is getting worrisome. Could you please let someone know you're all right?" Was the first mention of worry, not regret, not apology, just the inconvenience of silence. I listened to the message on speaker. Sitting on the bed in the motel room, the window opened just enough to let the breeze lift the corner of the curtain. There was a small peanut cone on the sill. I don't know how it got there, but I left it. I didn't respond. After that came the texts. "Where are you? Are you okay? Mom, please." They stacked up like unpaid bills. I didn't delete them. I didn't reply. I let them sit. Then someone posted on Facebook. A cousin from Evan's side. "Have you seen Aunt Lillian lately? Evan's been trying to reach her. Family matters. Thanks for any info." It had begun. The ripple of concern that isn't really concern. It's a kind that's more about optics than emotion. What will people think? She's not answering. She missed the wedding. Maybe she's unwell. There were comments under the post, few tagging me. A few saying things like she always was a little sensitive, or maybe she's just taking time for herself. None of them knew anything. Another voicemail came. It's time from Evan again. It was shorter. "Mom, I don't understand. This is about the wedding. We didn't mean to hurt you. We were trying to make it simple. You made it complicated by disappearing. That word stuck. I hadn't disappeared. I just stopped making myself visible to people who only saw me when it served them. I wasn't lost. I was exactly where I wanted to be." I imagined him pacing, checking his phone, wondering if he should involve the police. But what would he report? That his mother was unreachable after being asked to stay home from his wedding. That she'd quietly packed her life into a folder and walked away without a scene. He didn't know the motel address. He didn't know about the trust or the new will. He didn't know that the last vestiges of control had slipped from his hands. Weeks before the wedding photos were printed, I had made myself unreachable on purpose. Let them unravel. Let them sit with the space I left behind. There is a kind of power in absence. Not silence out of submission, but silence as a full sentence. On the 4th week, I received a letter. Not typed, handwritten. I recognized his loops, though they were messier now. Rush dotted said he didn't know what I wanted. That he hadn't meant to hurt me. That he wished I'd just told him what was wrong instead of making him guess. I folded the letter and put it in the drawer with the motel Bible and my emergency folder. It didn't hurt the way I thought it might. He still believed this was a misunderstanding, that I was waiting to be coaxed back. That if he said enough of the right words, I'd return to the script, the grateful mother, the silent witness, the always there. But I had already stopped auditioning. For that role, I watched as they began to lose the thread. The longer I stayed gone, the more panicked the messages became. Evan's posts turned vaguer, then louder. One said he was worried about my mental health. Another, that family should never just walk away. I almost laughed. Family shouldn't erase you from the most important day of their life either. But I didn't post back. I didn't explain myself in a comment box. I let the silence speak louder. My neighbor left a message too. Said Evan had knocked, looked worried, asked if I'd been sick. She told him I hadn't said much before I left, just that I was taking some time. Good for you, her message said. Whatever this is about, I hope it brings you peace. It did. There is something beautifully final about quiet boundaries. The kind where you don't yell or slam doors or send letters dipped in resentment. The kind where you just take your name back and go. No headlines. No declarations. Just a closed door that doesn't need to open again. It was never about revenge. I didn't want to make them suffer. I didn't want them to grovel or show up crying in the rain. I just wanted to breathe air that hadn't already been measured for someone else's comfort. That's what the motel gave me. A narrow bed, a chipped desk, the soft rattle of the heater in the morning. It wasn't luxury. It was space. Mine. After the first month, I moved to a longer-term rental. A cottage off the main road, hidden behind a row of sugar maples that had just started to turn. It was the kind of place you wouldn't notice unless you were looking for it. Which was perfect, because no one was. It had a screened porch and a hummingbird feeder the last tenant had left behind. I filled it one morning just to see. By afternoon, 2 of them hovered near it, vibrating in the sun. I watched them like I'd never seen anything so precise. There was a small market within walking distance. The man at the counter called me. Ma'am, but smiled like he meant it. I learned his name was Thomas. His mother had run the store before him. He told me that on my 3rd visit, when I bought a jar of plum jam and complimented the paper label. He said he printed them himself. He never asked what brought me here. He never asked where I was from. But he remembered the kind of tea I liked. That counted for more. In the mornings, I walked along the river path behind the cottage. The leaves had started to fall, but the light still came in through the trees in long yellow ribbons. Sometimes I passed a woman walking a gray mutt with kind eyes. Sometimes we nodded. Once we sat on the same bench and shared silence. That was enough. I began writing again. Not letters, not diaries, just thoughts, observations, what the air smelled like, how the water moved when a branch dropped, in how much quieter my own mind had become without the burden of being misunderstood. I didn't post any of it. I didn't need applause. I just wanted to see myself on the page. Proof of life. The cottage had no internet, no television. I bought a small radio just for music. Mostly classical. Sometimes jazz. I let the static fill the corners of the room. When the reception dipped, even the flaws felt alive. I found a little church nearby. I didn't go for sermons. I went for the community dinners they held every Thursday. Long table, mismatched chairs, soup in big ceramic bowls. People brought what they had. One woman brought pickles every week. Another always brought a story that made everyone laugh, even if it wasn't funny. No one asked me to explain myself. They just passed the bread and asked if I wanted more. I met a woman there named June, 62, widowed young. She wore thick glasses and always had flour on her sleeves. She made pie crusts like they were armor. On my 4th week, she handed me a small bag of ginger cookies and said, "You look like someone who could use sweetness." I thanked her. I didn't cry. I just held the bag in both hands like a gift. I didn't know how to unwrap. She became the first person I led into the new version of my life, slowly, on my terms. She never pushed. Just showed up when she said she would. Remembered things I'd said without needing to write them down. One evening, I told her about Evan, not the whole thing, just that I had a son, that there'd been distance. That some silences stretched too long to come back from, she said, sometimes. Letting go is the kindest thing we can do for both people. I didn't answer, but I wrote it down that night. In ink, letting go is not cruelty. It's mercy with no return address. Some days, I still checked my phone. I'd scroll through the voicemails, the texts, the unread emails. Some had turned bitter. Some were begging. A few were quiet, but none of them said the thing that would have mattered. I see now. I'm sorry I chose wrong. That was okay. I wasn't. waiting anymore. I didn't hate him. I just couldn't carry the story he kept trying to write me into. The one where I was unreasonable, dramatic, fragile. The one where he got to decide what counted as hurtful. That's the thing no one tells you. About motherhood, sometimes it becomes a costume they expect you to wear forever. Forgiving, smiling, always available, never upset. Grateful for breadcrumbs. I took off the costume, not because I was angry, because it didn't fit anymore. My name is Lillian. I drink my tea unsweetened now. I walk every day unless it rains. And even then, sometimes I go anyway. I found a bookstore that lets you sit as long as you want without buying anything. I stay, for hours, thumbing through pages, listening to the bell above the door ring whenever someone new walks in, and I'm learning slowly that the absence of pain is not the same thing as joy. But it's a good place to start. It came on a Friday afternoon, a plain envelope, no return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Still Evans, a little neater than before, a little more careful. Like he'd practiced, inside was a letter 3 pages long. He said he hadn't known how to start, that he'd rewritten it 4 times, that nothing sounded right. But he wanted to try. He wrote that he was sorry if the wedding decision had hurt me, that it hadn't been his idea to leave me out, but he hadn't fought it either. That had felt easier at the time to avoid the tension, that he assumed I would understand. That line caught me. Assumed I would understand. It wasn't meant cruelly. I could hear his voice in it, soft, apologetic, but underneath still carried the weight of expectation that I would absorb the hurt like I always had, that my forgiveness would arrive quietly, like clockwork. He said he missed me. The house felt colder without my voice. Think he didn't know how to explain to Hannah what had happened? Think he wasn't sure if he should explain it at all? That she still didn't think she'd done anything wrong? He asked if I could call Dot just to talk. He said he was open to repairing things, that he'd been going to therapy, and he was trying to understand his patterns. That he was learning how to show up better. I read it once, and again I believed he meant every word. But what he didn't say mattered more. He didn't say he saw me. Not really. He didn't say he understood why I'd left, only that he missed my presence, my place in his life. He missed the role I'd played, not the woman I was outside of it, and maybe that's all he could offer. Maybe it was more than some sons ever give. But it wasn't enough to ask me to return to the shape he remembered, Dot, so I didn't write back. Not yet. Instead, I sat with it. I let the words settle the way leaves do after a storm, slow, scattered, mostly harmless. The next evening, I walked down to the river. The light was thin, gold, like old lace. I brought the letter with me, folded in my coat pocket. I sat on the bench where I sometimes watched the ducks. I held the paper like something I'd borrowed, not something meant for me. After a long while, I pulled out my own pen. I wrote 2 pages on thick paper. My name signed at the bottom in dark, steady ink. I told him I was not angry. I told him I had forgiven him, long before he knew he needed to ask. But I also told him that forgiveness is not an invitation. That love does not mean returning to the scene of your own erasure. That absence is not always punishment. Sometimes it is the clearest boundary you can draw. I told him I was well, that I was not lost, not confused, not waiting, that I had found a quieter version of peace. I was learning to tend it like a garden. I wished him the same. I did not ask. About Hannah. I did not say I missed him. I said, I remember who you were when you were small, and that version of you I will always love. Then I ended the letter with 3 words. Let me be. I didn't mail it that day. I held on to it. I let it sit by the hummingbird feeder for 2 nights. On the 3rd morning, I walked to the post office and dropped it into the slot myself. No fanfare. No breath held. Just the soft thunk of truth being sent away. That evening, June came by with a peach pie wrapped in wax paper. She said, "You look lighter today." I told her I'd finished something I'd been carrying too long. We sat on the porch and ate our slices without plates. The pie was still warm. She asked if I thought he'd write again. I said maybe, but I wouldn't be waiting for it. June nodded. That's good, she said. You deserve to live a story that isn't always about trying to be chosen, that stayed with me all my life. I had twisted myself into shapes that might be easier for someone else to love. Now I was simply standing still, and that was enough. The first frost came early that year. I woke to windows laced with white breath and silence outside so thick it felt sacred. Even the birds seemed to pause. The leaves were almost gone from the maples. What was left clung low to the branches, soft as old paper. I made tea and wrapped myself in the old brown cardigan I used to wear when Evan was small. He called it my bear coat. I used to joke that it protected me from bad dreams. Now it just kept my arms warm. Still useful, even after all the stories had been taken out of it. I sat by the window and looked at the pine tree across the gravel road. One lone crow perched near the top, still as a sentry. He didn't move for a long time. Neither did I. It had been over 2 months since the wedding, since I mailed the letter, since I chose not to be invited back into something that never truly included me. The calls had stopped. The messages slowed, then disappeared. Even Evan's name no longer showed up in the missed call list. There was no final goodbye. Distance that grew like moss, slow, quiet, eventually permanent. I didn't check Facebook anymore. I didn't. Wonder who said what. I didn't search for tagged photos of events I'd never be part of again. The truth is, most people don't notice when a woman like me disappears. Not because they don't care, but because they assume she always be there, that she exists in orbit, ready to return if summoned gently enough. But I had found a place with no summons. No need to prove my worth by my availability. No one here cared if I showed up every time with something baked, something pressed, something softened to be easier to hold. I had stopped softening myself. I had started simply being. One afternoon in late October, I walked to the river again. Same bench, same curve in the path. But this time I brought something with me. A photo. The only one I had left of Evan as a child. He was 8. Standing barefoot in our old backyard, holding a garden hose like a sword, water spraying toward. The setting sun. His face still had baby roundness. His eyes were wide, unguarded. He wasn't a man yet, just a boy who still believed his mother could fix anything. I sat with the photo in my lap for a long time, not to remember what was lost, but to thank the version of him that once loved me fully. Before the world, before the expectations, the silences, the calculations, made him forget how. I whispered something I'd never said aloud, not even in the motel room. You were enough once. I was too. Then I folded the photo just once and tucked it into a jar. I'd brought matches in a small tin box. I didn't do it out of anger. I did it out of finality. I burned the image slowly, watching the edges curl. Ash collected in the tin like old snow. When it was done, scattered it into the river with my hand. The water took it without question. I didn't cry. I walked home. That night, I took out the journal, the one I started the day I left. I wrote the final entry, October 28th, clear sky. First frost. I burned the last picture and felt nothing but stillness. My name is Lillian. I am not waiting anymore. I am not angry. I am not broken. I am here. And this time, no one gets to name what that means but me. I tore the page out and taped it to the inside of the kitchen cabinet. Not hidden, not flaunted, just placed. So if anyone ever opens it, if someone someday finds this cottage and wonders who lived here, they'll see more than just my name on the lease. They'll see the words I gave myself. I'm not the woman they left off the guest list. I'm not the voice they silenced with politeness and omission. I'm not a chapter they forgot to finish. I'm the ending they never saw coming. And now, I get to write what comes next. Just me, my tea, my porch. My breath, that crow outside still watches the same branch every morning. Like he's waiting for the world to catch up. But I don't wait anymore. I wake up. I eat toast, I tend my garden, and when the mail comes, I don't flinch. The past lives. In a closed drawer now, the future is mine alone, and the present the quiet. Solid, beautiful present is enough. This time I decide who gets to call me anything else.